Seems like it's working now. Excellent. You all have unlimited power. Do not abuse it. If you abuse it, I don't really care, but. All right, so we're gonna give one more minute because there were 20 some odd people registered and Zoom has been horrible about being slow for people. So just give another minute to let people join. If you do want to go ahead, it looks like everyone has the power now that you can turn on your video. So if you want to do that, go for it. Not obligated, but I won't be able to see the faces you're making at me if you don't.
But then we also get to see where everybody is.
Exactly. I'm in France right now, obviously at the Louvre. They opened just for me.
I'm hovering above Earth.
Nice. Ooh, we've got, is that the future city from Westworld? Is that what I'm seeing there? What is that?
You talked about mine, it's Star Wars.
Oh, it's Star Wars, same idea. Future thing. Ian says he has the same mug as me. I love it because you can put like the biggest cup of coffee ever, and then I use the heating pad from my tea kettle to put this on so it can last all day without me having to go make new coffee. It's magic.
That's just slightly ridiculous.
Well, I save the environment. Instead of making one cup at a time, I can brew a whole pot, you see, and it fits in my coffee cup.
I have a microwave.
Well, that works too. Kind of gross. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Those of you who are already here, you will have heard we are giving you mic and camera access because we want this to be a conversation. We've all got a little cabin fever and you really shouldn't let me just talk at the screen with no feedback. So Stephanie will keep promoting people as they come in. If for some reason you lose sound while we're in the middle of this, that has been happening. You can mess with all of the, oh, let's reconfigure my my audio, but really what's been working best for people is just Xing out and then coming back in. So the same is true for your presenters. Should we get kicked out or something weird happen, we'll just X out and come back in. So we'll just be gentle with the technology today because it's been getting worse and not better. So first off, thank you all so much for joining us. So this is Community Dialogues in support of our planet Earth. So we had scheduled all of these community dialogue webinars, assuming people were going to be hosting in-person community dialogues in support of Earth Day and our Planet Earth campaign. Obviously, no one is doing that now. So that's part of the reason why we want this to be more of a conversation. We want to talk about how people can use this strategy while we're all stuck inside and how people might use it once things reopen, whenever that may be. So certainly, if you have something to add, please just go ahead and unmute your mic and say it. If you don't want to do that or your microphone isn't working, go ahead and type in the chat. Make sure when you're doing that, you click share with all. If you just click share with panelists, we'll see the lovely things you wrote, but nobody else will. And Stephanie and Jennifer will be keeping track of the chat for me and letting me know if anyone has something to add. So Stephanie, next slide. Sorry, you're gonna have to.
I know I'm doing both. Hold on. Technology too. My computer's fun. Here we go.
So I think 3 of the 4 people listed there are on today. So those of you who don't know me, I think I know all of you. I'm Annie from the Space Science Institute. I'm our community engagement and exhibits manager. We also have Stephanie.
Hi, so my name is Stephanie Vero Fields. I am an education coordinator with focus on relationship building and management.
And we also have Jennifer. Jennifer, do you have a mic?
Sure. Hello, good morning. I am a projects administrative assistant for SSI. Happy to be here.
And Jennifer, I don't know if you knew this, but right now you are the in the top half of longest employed people in NCIL. You're number 5 on the list.
Wow.
I just looked at that this morning. Very
exciting.
Congratulations. Been stuck with us for a while. Stephanie, next slide, please.
Thank you.
Okay, so today's agenda, we did the welcome and introductions, check. I want to talk a little bit, even though we're not really doing it anymore, about why we decided to kind of promote the community dialogues at this level and around the Earth Day topic. A quick community dialogues 101, what the heck is a community dialogue and how is it different than what I already do? Some requests we have for you, and then we have some open time for discussion. But again, If you want to say something before we get to the discussion, please go ahead and do that. Next slide, please. So we began.
Hold on. It's loading now. Sorry.
Perfect. So we decided to do this idea of community dialogues in support of Earth Day for a few reasons. April this year was Citizen Science Month. It was the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. And most importantly to me, ALA recently adopted sustainability as a new core value for librarianship. So it was kind of energizing and made people excited that libraries really do have a place in those conversations in their community. Typically, when we promote community dialogues and when libraries have done them, they're not around a super specific topic. They're really just about how the library can better serve its community and reach out to folks who aren't using its services. But we decided it was entirely appropriate to center these around the sustainability idea because of what was happening with all of those three things. Certainly now I'm not expecting, unless you want to do one around sustainability, for people to focus there. Really it is just about how can we serve our patrons right now. But worth pointing out that that's an angle folks can take, especially if you're in a community that has some kind of big environmental concerns. So I want to show you guys real quick, just like a 3-minute video. We'll see if this actually works. That Brooks Mitchell, you all know Brooks, put together about community dialogues for an NSF video competition. So Stephanie, let's push play and see if it works. I'll let you know if I can hear it, because that would mean everyone else can, I think. Nope. You can't hear it either. That's a good sign.
Yeah. There's a way to do this. I just got to remember what it is. I think it's something with Zoom.
You might just have to click out and just play it in YouTube and share that screen instead.
Yep, I'm going to do that.
Perfect. Yeah, it works in PowerPoint until you try to put it in Zoom, then it's 50-50.
Well, I'm trying to get it to work. A minute. Stop share. Sorry about this. This is something new that we are learning.
While she's getting that figured out, I'll give you a little heads up on the video. So we actually went down to the Broward County African American Research Library to watch their community dialogue in support of their Project Build program. So the lady that you see frozen on screen is their director, Lisa Jackson. Excuse me, just kind of talking about their library has done a bunch of these actually, and how it's different. Oops, I can hear it on my side now. How it's different from other programs that they have done. So Stephanie, why don't I take the share and I will play it on YouTube and you can let me know.
Okay.
Folks
I
can...
actually just figured out what it was, but go for it. All you.
Perfect. Teamwork.
Makes the dream work.
That's right. Good?
Yep, I can hear it.
Hello, my name is Lisa Jackson, and I'm Supervisor of Youth Services at the African American Research Library and Cultural Center. This is our third community dialogue. The first two we did at the beginning of the study in 2017. And it was something new that we did, and we changed some of the questions, but it's been a little while since I've done it. How is the STEM resources connections that we already have in our community be connected to programs about building and technology? There are many issues that we are facing, especially in this time and age.
And they think that many of them, and I'm not saying all, don't think that these careers are achievable. Yes. They think that they're for other people, not who don't look like us.
I enjoy picking people's brains.
In what ways are STEM fields relevant to our community?
Getting information, our participants have the best ideas, things I never thought of.
But when they go home, they get a different message. So we need to make sure that we're targeting both the children as well as their parents. And for me, that is my community.
And this is just a great way to get people up, to get them relaxed, to get them talking, and to get them thinking. And once they start really thinking about things, they get active and they want to make a difference.
But STEM will definitely offer resources, and that's the sell. That's the sell. That's when we're communicating with parents and we say, this is a good deal. You know, little Johnny loves math, you know, an engineering program can feed him for the rest of his life. Or, you know, Susie loves math, an engineering program can feed her for the rest of her life.
Some of these people I've invited that I heard of that I haven't worked with, and now I think we're going to do a lot of work with them. And so it's an opportunity to really build our outreach. The Boys and Girls Club, which is less than a mile away, we've never worked with them. And tonight we've decided that we are going to do some robotics and some STEM programs together. They have robotics and they have chess classes there, and we have chess classes here, so we're going to do that too.
All right, Stephanie, you can have the share screen back. While Stephanie's bringing that back up, I just wanted to point out a couple of things about that community dialogue. I haven't told you exactly how they're different from other community events yet, but you saw the kids running around, you saw the food. People have often said, oh, Annie, I can't do this because people have kids and they're busy. And we just told the kids to come, and honestly, they made it way more fun. And showed them what they were really talking about. So yeah, if you can bring back the slides. Oh, there it is. That was weird. It like was stuck on another screen for a second. So next slide, thank you. Now it's gonna start playing in the background. So what the heck is a community dialogue? When I ask people to just throw out an answer, normally the answer is, oh, it's like a focus group. So can someone really quick tell me what a focus group normally does? What is a focus group? How would you define it in one sentence? If you let me answer, I'll answer in a way that is beneficial to me. So you should answer.
This is Rita. I think it's when you are deliberate on very specific ideas and actions that you are trying to get going.
Absolutely. Rita is not a plant. That is 100% what a focus group is. It has a particular idea or sometimes a product that you are testing, that you've already done a lot of building behind, right? So you're taking that next step almost in a prototyping way. The big difference with community dialogues is that I encourage people to do them before they start coming up with those ideas and building the next steps towards a program or an initiative. So community dialogues then, they're informal conversations with community stakeholders, leaders, and members. In a library setting, the other big difference with a focus group is focus groups are normally patrons, right? You'll bring in your group of trusty patrons that always come to your focus groups and tell you what they want, which is great. The people who come to your library are getting the things that they want in that library. But one of our big goals with a community dialogue is to reach beyond that, to the folks who aren't using your venue and your great resources, to let them know what is meaningful there for them and how they can actually change what's happening in the library. So people have done these community dialogues with any of these combinations of people, stakeholders, leaders, and members. But I really encourage you, and this is what Lisa did in the video we just saw, to start with community stakeholders. So other organizations in your community that serve the community. It can be the Boys and Girls Club, the school district, a museum, a historical society, immigration services, cultural organizations like churches, anybody like that. And especially if your goal is, I want to better reach my Native community, or I want to better reach, in Lisa's community, it's the Haitian Creole speaking community. Then make sure you invite people who not necessarily represent, but at least belong to those groups, because they know not always 100% what those groups need, but they at least know how to reach them. After you've talked to those stakeholders and leaders and got their buy-in and make them see that they're partners and not just recipients of your programs, it becomes a lot easier rather to reach out into those communities. That said, people have definitely also just invited community members just straight off. What I recommend if you're doing that is do it in a place that's safe and comfortable for those people. If you invite community members to come and join a conversation at your library, who are you going to get? Who shows up if you just put out an announcement that community members are welcome to talk about issues at your library? I'm counting to 8, it hurts me. You're gonna get the people you already serve, right? You guys know the mom that comes to story time every week, the grandma who comes to the computer skills class every month. Those are the people who are gonna show up because they're the people who already trust you and know that you listen to them. So we recommend if you're going to start with a community dialogue with community members, do it somewhere else. Do it at church, do it at maybe a museum if you wanna get that crowd. Do it in a public park. Obviously things we can't do right now, but use your imagination. Do it in places where people feel comfortable going, because if they're already not coming to your venue, there's no incentive for them to do it right now until they can trust you. Right now, in the current environment that we're in, we're encouraging people to conduct community dialogues online. What's really great about that is you can still start the same way we're talking about. Talk to the stakeholders and the leaders first. And then once you've got their buy-in and the buy-in of other community organizations who have resources, right? So you're not reinventing the wheel and doing the same thing multiple times. They'll be able to help you then talk to those community members you're wanting to reach, which again, can be online too. And frankly, for folks that are a little nervous about these kind of things, that online option is a really nice one. And if you're worried about folks not having internet, just phone conversations, right? What are those called when you have multiple people on the line? I just totally lost English vocabulary. A conference call. Wow. We've been Zooming way too much the past month. I don't know how technology works anymore. So when we started these community dialogues, the idea was to encourage libraries to reach out to new partners, number one, I think, and then consider how to better reach underserved audiences and meet those patrons where they are. So let's talk a little bit about what a stakeholder or a leader means. Stephanie, do you want to tell my story? I'm tired of telling my story. Joe, sandwich shop, go.
So, wow, way to put me on the spot. So Annie loves to tell this story about a community dialogue that happened in a rural community that was very much a food desert. And they had reached out to the mayor, county commissioners, the typical people you would think, but Joe from the sandwich shop also came along, and Joe knew everything about everyone because he literally had the only restaurant in a 50-mile radius. And so everybody who was anybody would stop in his establishment in order to buy food. So he knew what was going on in the community because the whole community would come through his restaurant. So kind of thinking outside the box and thinking of those people that would know others, you know, he was able to provide a lot more dialogue of what the community needed than the county commissioners could because they weren't in the community in the same way he was.
Exactly. Thank you. See, you're just as good at it as I am. And I've talked too much. So yeah, it's not just the mayor, right? It's people who know the community and even more important, are trusted in the community. So two of the ladies that you saw who brought kids with them to Lisa's dialogue, they're homeschool parents, but they run a ginormous online homeschooling group. So they are very well respected and very well known in that circle. So they might not have any official title or be the CEO of XYZ, but when they went back to that online homeschool community and said, the library is committed to doing this for us, what can we do to support them? People listened. Stephanie, next slide, please. So really quick, you know, we had this quote in here before. It was Lisa's video we showed. Now it looks like we've only done one community dialogue, but I assure you there have been hundreds. So Lisa says, there's no doubt that the community dialogues are beneficial to all parties. I think this method should be employed more often when we're considering all kinds of services, initiatives, and programs for our community. I like to quote Lisa because they have done such a good job with reaching out to their community historically, and I'm sure most of you have as well. Focus groups and surveys, looking at census data. That's all super duper important, and it continues to be important. But for Lisa, she saw that the dialogues were a step beyond that, to working more closely with community partners and with people who weren't already coming to the library. So even though in the program we funded her for, she was only required to do one of these, she's done 3 now, and she's got 2 more scheduled. So just to point out, we know that you're all already doing great work with and in your community, but this is just another framework and lens for which to look at it. Stephanie, next. So a couple requests for you guys. If anyone decides to do one of these community dialogues, there's 2 surveys that you can find really easy on our website. One is for you guys as the conveners. So what did you like about the framework, which I'll show you how to find later? What would you do different? Who did you invite? And then another one for the people who actually come. So did those new potential community partners show up and think, wow, I had no idea what the library already did. Now we can partner on this. Or did they think, I didn't really get anything from that? Because we're constantly, this is an evolving process, and we're constantly changing it based on library and museum feedback to make sure that we're providing stuff that's actually relevant for everyone. And then my last request is please send pictures, because as much as I love all of Lisa's pictures, I'd like to also use some other folks' pictures. Next slide. So now you all are required to talk, or you'll just have to keep hearing me. So I would like to know why you guys joined this webinar today. Why are you interested in doing a community dialogue? How is it different from the engagement work you're already doing? And again, feel free to unmute or type in the chat box.
You know, I've done one before, if you guys can hear me.
Yes.
Okay, and I had 2 people show up of the 20 that I sent letters to, which was really disappointing. So I want to try to do it again, especially during this time when we need to know what the community wants or needs right now. So that's why I want to do another one.
Excellent. And yeah, and that happens sometimes, that you invite people and they don't
with
show
the
up.
Sonoma County
yeah.
Library
Go ahead.
in California. And we were in the middle of doing a new, what do we want to be when we grow up kind of a process, both at the staff level and at the commission level just before this all happened. I think it's even more critical to really talk about how libraries are going to be different, but we want the community involved as well. And I was with San Francisco, the Friends, for a long time, and as we renovated all the branches, we had lots and lots of community conversations. And I have to say that that was the most important thing and smart thing that the library did. So I'd like to do that in Sonoma too.
Excellent. Let me see, I saw some chats pop up and then I immediately closed it. So Sandy says she's curious to see how this could work in a small public library looking for ideas. So I can give you an example really quick. So one of the first community dialogues that I watched was in a teeny tiny little town in Colorado called Cortez, way off on the border. Mostly the people coming through there are tourists, not a lot of locals. And this was a dialogue in support of our Discover Health program. So at that program then, again, we didn't really have, it wasn't like, we're going to eliminate drug use in the county, right? It was more, let's come talk about health concerns and see what we can do. So they invited someone from their local area health education center. They invited some doctors and nurses. And they were really interested in working more with their Spanish-speaking population, because while it was huge, most of them just came in, used the internet and left, right? They didn't stay for programs. And they had been trying to change this for years and years. So they invited that pretty small group of people, but really energetic and really energized to talk and make changes. Like, these are people who live in a town of, 15K together, but had never talked, right? And they got some fantastic outcomes out of that dialogue. They learned that their efforts to reach Spanish speakers, the reason they weren't working is because the Spanish speakers didn't know they were for them. One of the things they had done is used a grant to buy hundreds of Spanish language children's books, picture books. And they made a whole little nook that said Spanish language reading corner or something under it. And no one checked them out. Like no one picked up a single book, and they were so confused because they'd see the families come in, they'd use the internet and leave. And we talked to someone from, I believe it was a Spanish-speaking church, a Catholic church in the area, and they said, we thought those were for the gringos to learn how to speak Spanish. We had no idea they were for us. Why is it in English if it's for us? Like a simple thing. And this librarian had spent 3 years wondering why no one was using the resource, right? So these things don't have to be big, and they don't have to have like a hard-hitting pitch, right? To be meaningful. It's really catching those little anecdotes that can make a big difference in the venue. Jennifer asked what other topics community dialogues have been focused on in the past. So Lisa's that we just saw was about how engineers in the community could show kids that that was a meaningful path for them, because like one of the participants said, a lot of the African-American kids did not think that anything around science or math was something they were like even allowed to do. Others have talked about how to use the kind of historical assets in their community, right? Like people who worked on the Apollo mission, how can they participate in stuff. Much more recently, even since the first webinar we did for this series, some libraries that have been doing these virtually have been asking the very simple but very impactful question of how can we support the community and how can other community partners join us in that effort. So there's a couple libraries who've had online community dialogues who had a whole bunch of supplies that they purchased for whatever programs that have got canceled. And now they're partnering with the grocery store or with the food bank and making little take and make, I always say it backwards, take and make activities, right, of UV kit or things like that, that kids are picking up when they pick up their school lunches or when the parents go to the food bank or even just like at the checkout stand at Kroger or King Soopers, right? Little things, but folks have said that they've gotten new library card signups because of those little things. And those are people who are going to use your services again moving forward. So all of that is to really say, don't think this has to be like a big ground shaking kind of thing. It's really moving the needle more than anything else. I just blathered a lot. Does anyone else want to respond to this prompt before we move on?
Okay. Can I come in, Anne?
Please, Mac, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm a museum consultant, and I use these kinds of discussions in planning processes for museums that are looking at what the community wants and needs them to be doing in the future. And one of the things I found is that when you do a community dialogue or conversation and the moderator is neutral, not a member of a organization in that community, we hear things that nobody will tell to the organization itself. Mm-hmm. They are more likely to be honest and forthright, especially when the meeting starts out by saying, I'm listening, but I'm not quoting, and your name will not be associated with anything that anybody here says. And I have gone back to my clients and informed them of things about them that they never dreamed that they were. And this is what the community really thinks. And that's a fantastically useful way of getting information that can affect planning strategies for the immediate future and ways to serve the community better. Now, finally knowing what the community really thinks.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mac. And especially if it's not patrons, what other community serving organizations think? Like the number of times I wanted to bash my head on the wall because someone had said, oh, the library just does books, right? Like, why does it matter that they're closed right now? Yeah, right? And those are people that once they know the amazing work you're doing, like we have a social worker and we do XYZ, then they know how you guys can, again, work together instead of doing the same thing in two separate places. Sandy says, we're planning to virtually share some of summer reading program activities with the community on a weekly basis. I'd not considered this as a community dialogue program. I'm feeling better about it now. Yeah, absolutely. These are what you make them, right? A lot of these sort of initiatives and frameworks are like, you must do X, Y, Z. I have a paper, you can read it, or you can just talk to people and let me know how it went. That's really good too. Stephanie, you can go ahead to the next slide.
Yep.
Donka. So this is a big one. Who will you invite? Do you think it's going to be the community leaders? Do you trust yourself as a facilitator to start with community members? If anyone's seen Parks and Rec, I just remember, like, I could never do one that was community members, because I remember Leslie Knope having this big community forum and everyone just yelling at her and talking over each other. If you can facilitate that, go for it. But I definitely recommend, if you've not done these big kind of group conversations before, start with community leaders and stakeholders, because I think they're a little better at talking in these group settings. Deborah says, also very important to build relationships, so when you need voters, you have them. Absolutely. People who don't use the library very much, like I honestly don't use the library very much because I use my school library, and my kids are a little too old to be going to story time programs, and we're busy people. I will still vote for every library tax increase that you throw at me, because I understand why libraries are valuable. Even if people aren't walking into your building, they need to have that understanding. That's a really good point, Deb. So everyone else, who will you invite?
This is Joe from the Washington State Library. Along the same vein of basically eliciting support for yourself on the library world and stating how important you are. Some years ago, actually it wasn't that long ago, when all the budget cuts were happening and so forth, the state library once again was put on the chopping block in legislation.
Every year.
Yeah, and so basically what we did and what we were asked to do is to state our importance to them. And so we were really good at stating the importance of all the other libraries around the state and what their accomplishments were, but never ours. Oh. And so we purposely went out with, you know, I wouldn't say campaigns, but intentional advertising, if you will, that as tooting our own horn, and it really paid off. There's a lot of legislators who basically turned the corner and said, "Oh, I get it now. You're not just books." And, right. And that the libraries in general are not just books, because they had that. Even though libraries throughout the state were doing wonderful things, and we were supporting them and highlighting them all the time, that you know, they still missed it all until we brought it to their focused attention, if you will.
Right. Absolutely. Stephanie, do you have any suggestions for who people should invite?
I always have suggestions.
Now I'm using my plant, yes.
Yes, now I'm the plant. Yeah, no, I actually have a few suggestions, and a lot of this comes from my experience. I used to be a district executive for the Boy Scouts before I worked for SSI, and you know, we're all about community engagement. And so a lot of the people you want to think about are religious leaders. So priests, pastors, rabbis, anybody who has a significant religious presence in your community is a great person to reach out to, because they will have, you know, a lot of the ear of the community, and they are somebody who can give you some really great ideas. Anybody who runs your local Kiwanis Club, Key Club, VFW posts, Rotary clubs are great. They're local business leaders. You can look at business districts. I don't know how common that is. We do have some in Colorado, where like we have something called the Havana Motor Mile down in Aurora, which is literally about 35 car dealerships along a 5-mile long road. And that's the Havana Business District. And so people from those have some great ideas, and they know the community. You want to look at, you know, your elected leaders, whoever you can come. I know Annie likes to use the example of the governor of, I think it was Iowa, went to a community dialogue at their library and was able to get some great ideas and realize how important the library is. So you never know who is a resource. Joe put HOAs. Yeah, absolutely. Your HOA president or HOA presidents are part of those community leaders, and they will know and be able to engage and help you figure out. And one of the biggest advice I can give you from my own experience is, whenever you end a conversation with somebody, whether they say yes or whether they said no, say, awesome, who else should I talk to? You know, who else should I reach out to? Asking that simple question helps build your web of people in your community, because maybe, yeah, the mayor probably can't come. You know, he's got a huge thing on his plate. He's got too many things to go to, but he can recommend a county commissioner, and you go to that county commissioner and say, hey, the mayor recommended you. Is a great way to help build your network and help build your web of your community, because because it's that 6 degrees of separation idea. One person knows at least 6 people. You go from that, you keep building out.
Right. And Jennifer added some great ideas for cultural organizations, consulates, which Stephanie, we have to add that to our list. I don't think we had that before.
I don't think so.
Any sort of Hispanic associations. There's a Hispanic Chamber of Commerce is the one I always say. Refugee organizations. Those have been really big, especially in Colorado when we've done the community dialogues. Folks especially, so again, this is perhaps just a Colorado problem because I don't know the populations in your states, but one of the bigger immigrant populations is Hispanic immigrants from Mexico, Spanish speaking migrant workers, right? And in Mexico, libraries aren't for them. Libraries are like the ivory towers for people who work at universities, and you have to pay to go to them. They're like a museum, you need a membership. So we've done, like Mac was talking about, walk down the street focus groups, and folks have said, oh yeah, we're not allowed to go there. We don't have a membership. It's like, oh my God, that's not what a library is. But so simply getting that information, doing a little program, even better if it's in Spanish, at those organizations so that they can share that information with people, have library sign-up cards at immigrant services and at those refugee organizations. As a result of the community dialogue, some Colorado libraries, and I know that this is a big change, but it's one they were able to do. A big barrier for those populations, once they knew they could use the library, is they didn't have permanent addresses, so they couldn't bring in a piece of mail to get their library card. So the libraries changed it so that these folks could use immigration services or whatever organization they're getting any sort of support from, a church or whatever, they can use that as their home address to get their library card. Because honestly, are you guys tracking people down for that one book that their kid stole 3 years ago? You're not. So why not let people, to remove that particular barrier for that particular population anyway, be a little more flexible with how folks get library cards. And again, folks didn't know this was a problem until the community came and told them. So Deb added some more places, local restaurant associations, American Association of University Women, veterans orgs. Yeah, absolutely. It's really the VFW, that's a thing. The possibilities are pretty much endless, and it's really dependent on what's big in your area, right? The Chamber of Commerce might mean nothing, but the VFW is where it's at, right? You just need to know in your community what's important.
So Rita says, are these usually organized around specific initiatives? These are busy people, too busy to just sit and chat. You'd be surprised, and this is actually something I learned from the Boy Scouts. The busier a person is, the more organized they are. You'd be surprised of how much people who are very busy want to come and express something. They usually are tied to specific topics or specific things. So sometimes if they're able to branch out, yes, you might get someone who says no, that they are too busy. But you might also get someone who's like, you know what, I've never heard of this. I would like to be a part of this. I'd like to hear things, because this is a networking opportunity for them as much as it is for you. And sometimes if you are able to present it in that way that, hey, here's a chance to come meet other community leaders you may not know, they will be more inclined to come to something like this.
Absolutely. And some other framing that's worked well in the past, because some libraries don't want to have a specific topic. They really just do want to see what other folks are doing, is you can still frame it around things like, we want to discuss equity initiatives across government organizations, right? And see where we're duplicating effort, especially if you're wanting to invite government officials. If you can make it about efficiency, right? We want to find efficient ways to bring our initiatives together. Well, what initiatives? Well, XYZ, whatever, right? Whatever your community's doing. But the conversation's going to be natural and it's going to flow from there. But using things like equity and efficiency is a really good way, especially for those government folks, to get them to want to join. Another great option, if you're talking to cash-strapped groups, cash-strapped groups like yourself, you know, Boys and Girls Club and all of them, everyone who's grant funded. Again, this could be about, let's get together and talk about what things we're all doing that we can put in a grant for, right? Folks, I often talk to libraries who are afraid to apply to IMLS because, oh, I'm just one organization. They want bigger things. Those bigger things can involve your community members, right? And your other community organizations. There's a lot of options for framing that still doesn't tie you down to a specific topic.
So Ian says, I feel like this is a dumb question, but how do you get true and accurate reflection of the community? Sometimes community leaders will slant their input for a range of reasons.
And that's a wonderful question, and that's absolutely going to happen. And sometimes the unfortunate answer is you have to do this a few times. When High Plains Library District, I think it was them, someone in Colorado did theirs. The first one, yeah, they were getting a lot of like politicizing, and they're like, great, that's not who I'm inviting next time. And they went to more grassroots organizations. So yeah, people are always going to come with their own biases and slants. And really, there's not a lot of facilitation in these dialogues. You're just letting people talk, but this is the place where facilitation comes in the most, redirecting the conversation if people get up on their soapbox or are talking about things that aren't really relevant for the rest of the people in the conversation. It's why I always like to do a combination of like what you would consider a true community leader, like the council person or whatever, and then folks like those homeschool moms that Lisa brought to their dialogue. So folks who aren't necessarily like have a title in charge of something, but in social circles are well known and well respected. And that really helps balance that a little bit, but it won't ever be perfect. Jennifer asks, what's a good way to come up with discussion topics for your particular community dialogue? So questions to ask the participants. Very good question, Jennifer. So if you guys go to the community dialogue website, which we'll show at the end of the slides here, there are some suggested questions, which then have sub-questions that you could use to branch out. You'd be surprised at how broad the questions can be and still get a really good conversation going. So the current questions that we have suggested are things like, who in our community isn't using our library services, who should be? And that can very quickly uncover those little pockets of populations who just don't know what you have to offer. Other questions are, if they're not in the room right now, what other community organizations offer the same social services as the library does? Again, that's very library specific, but insert X, right, into social services. We do this for the community. Who else does it? And how can we work together and, you know, share each other's resources in a way that, again, is efficient and saves money? Good question, Jennifer. Stephanie, why don't you go ahead to the next slide? So we don't really have to do this one. This was for when we were trying to have a more specific focus for these community dialogues. So perhaps instead of what are your big environmental issues, just what big issues do you think folks might want to talk about in your community dialogue? Or small issues. It doesn't, you know, big means important. It doesn't mean world changing.
I was going to say something we can talk about as well is, you know, the current situation is something that some libraries have mentioned. Coronavirus is impacting communities, each community a slightly different way. So some libraries have been trying to figure out who to partner with to help, whether it's the local food bank, whether it's been school districts that could use some assistance, things like that. So that's something some people have been asking. You know, who can I partner with in the community to help?
Yeah, and the last report, you know, survey that I got back about a virtual community dialogue, literally the only question that they asked and what they put on the flyers at the grocery store and on Facebook to announce it is, how can the library do stuff for you while we're all stuck at home? And they had a bunch of things. So some was like what we'd already talked about, those take and make activities. This particular library is now doing curbside pickup. So they have had their staff 6 feet apart in the library and just, you know, cleaning things up, weeding and things like that. But now those folks there's a certain number every day. So it's like a lottery almost, but people are requesting books and they package them up and they do curbside pickup. And then those folks are keeping those books until things are done. Other libraries are, if they've got multiple drop boxes, the way they're handling sanitizing things is they only have one drop box open at a time, and then they close it off, and then they don't open it for 5 days, and that's long enough and then they, you know, still clean it, and then they kind of rotate drop boxes so they can do curbside. Other libraries are doing, using their bookmobiles as book drop-off mobiles and dropping them off at folks' houses. And certainly that's a money constraint. If you have the funds to do that, great. But some of the people who've had these conversations, it's literally been, instead of sending us cool videos of celebrities at story time, can you have the children's librarian do story time? Because our kids miss them, right? Like, oh, I cried a little. It's just little things like that. Like that didn't dawn on me. I thought, yeah, LeVar Burton, the kids are gonna way love to see Jordy reading a book. No, they wanted to see their librarian who they see every week reading a book. So again, these aren't big questions that have like big, huge solutions. It can literally be as simple as, what do the kids want from us?
Deborah, this is something that we've seen quite often in many of our surveys, is the lack of online connection with rural aging community. Yeah, that is actually a very big barrier. This is something we're coming in contact with, that we're trying. I don't think we'll ever find the answer, but we're finding ways to shorten the divide, pretty much. Some people have said that they're going to the library and parking in the library parking lot to use the Wi-Fi in order to access things. Doing similar things next to Starbucks, or some museums have free public access internet that people are able to go to. But yeah, so it's trying to find a way to connect. One of the things we heard is also providing, if you're doing something online, if there's a way they can telephone in too, because more people have telephones than they have computers. So they would still have an ability to like call in. You can also do a community dialogue similar to that, of a conference call. It's better if you can see someone, but you know, we take what we can get right now, because the nature of our society at the moment.
Right. And again, financial restraints or constraints, but there are a lot of libraries we know who have, you know, used some funds to buy up a bunch of hotspots, and they're checking out hotspots to folks. So yeah, that rural family might not have Wi-Fi every day, but at least they can, you know, get on to get some schoolwork done or whatever else they need to do. Yeah, Rita, that's so funny. I was just about to say that. Wisconsin's created a map of Wi-Fi spots at schools and libraries. Some of the towns in Wisconsin have also taken it a step farther, and they've been lobbying organizations to turn their Wi-Fi on, to turn off passwords and stuff, so that, you know, any organizations, you can, you know, drive around and not be right next to somebody, and use their Wi-Fi, right? Like, it's a little thing, and it's hard if someone's really, really far away, but I'll tell you, if you don't get out and drive your car a little bit, your batteries will both die, and you'll have to buy a battery for your car. So
I should have warned you, sorry.
People do need to drive a little bit. So yeah, initiatives like that, like, yeah, like Stephanie said, I think we're really unearthing a lot of inequity and inequality issues right now. And these are things that we might not, in the time of COVID, be able to respond to, but I encourage us all to remember these constraints we're talking about right now, so that when we do have more resources, we can start to think about them in a more meaningful way. Something that our boss Paul says a lot is, don't let the perfect be the enemy of progress, right? Or something like that. We're not going to be able to help every single person right now. And that's devastating, especially for librarians, because you're used to trying to do that. I totally understand. But keep the things that you can do at the forefront. I know you don't have giant budgets right now. I know a lot of you are furloughed right now. What can we do with the resources we have? And how do we keep those disenfranchised people in mind moving forward once we do have those resources back.
Well, and I was thinking too,
Sorry.
that might be a great community dialogue. You know, if you're reaching out to these community leaders, maybe contact them and say, hey, we've noticed a lack of online connection for our rural and aging communities. How can we fix that? And just see what comes up, because you may find that the local manager of the Starbucks is like, hey, you know, maybe I can expand my Wi-Fi, or, you know, things along those lines. So if you think, you know, our community dialogues do not have to be STEM related, do not have to be environmentally related. You know, you can work towards that, but, you know, if you right now, if you need to figure out how can I get, you know, internet to the most amount of people, use that.
Right. And frankly, we don't even care if you use our strategy or do something totally different. If being on this call made you think of some of these issues and you go do something, great. That's success. We really just want to be having these conversations. Another thing that people have told me about after their virtual community dialogues, and then, yeah, you can read this question while I'm talking, is similar to what we're talking about rural communities, is tribal communities are especially hard hit right now. Like, wash your hands a lot, but you don't have very much water and things like that. So again, the library can't solve that issue, right? You guys can't bring a water truck, though if you can, go for it. So again, taking, and they're going to continue doing this once you know, all of this is over. They're taking literally like a truck full of books and DVDs and other things and dropping them off. And then a week later, they come back and get them and trade them out. So the tribe can set up in whatever, I don't remember if it was at the school or something. They're literally setting up a little library, which they've never had before, being supplied by the public library, you know, an hour or whatever away. And this is a partnership that was built because of a community dialogue, because of COVID-19, and they're going to keep doing it because it's, you know, back and forth 2 hours of somebody's time to get those kids on that reservation, all that great stuff that they didn't have access to.
Ian
you've raised your hand.
I did. One of the things that I'm basically in charge of a makerspace, and in the future, whatever that looks like, it's, you know, that's one of the things that I'm having to think about, is what is that going to look like and everything. And one of the services we offered was 3D printing. So how I'm having to figure out, how does that look in the future? What does that look like? How do we get, because we had several entrepreneurs who were coming in quite frequently to use that and help build their business and help build their career. So I'm not looking for answers or anything, but that's just something else that's like very important. How can we continue to serve our community with these entrepreneurs and all these people who want to use these tools and be able to use them as we move forward?
Yeah, and those are the kind of conversations, like, to go to your, I think Joe would agree with me, go to your state library with and see if they can set up a Zoom just like this, because someone might have answered that question. I mean, that's a terrifying prospect, right? Knowing, you know, is it till 2022 that people aren't touching things in a library? That's absurd, but smart folks are thinking about it, right? You're thinking about it. So I would definitely encourage folks to reach out to their state libraries with ideas for conversations like this to have. And Ian, your background is awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, that was pretty fantastic. And kind of what we're talking about slides into this next question, which is, what are the barriers in your library preventing anyone from participating in this conversation? So right now, if we want to do virtual, they don't have internet. If they are from a Mexican community, they don't think the library is for them. That's a barrier. But what are some other barriers you guys can think of from your own communities that may cause an issue in being able to participate, that we can, you know, kind of brainstorm?
This is Don Parker in Northwest Indiana, and I'm director of a small rural library out here, and I'm going to back up, and I apologize for that.
Oh, that's fine.
Sorry, and my phone's ringing.
You're so popular.
Yeah, exactly. We are part here of a coalition. I posted this in the chat, but for some reason the thing shifted me without me trying to do it to just one person. So
weird. Okay.
We are part of a coalition that is working on rural broadband. And in Indiana, anyway, a number of rural electric co-ops are taking on the delivery of rural broadband And of course, rural electric co-ops were started in the 1930s and 40s for the purposes of rural electrification. And 5G in many cases won't work because you still have to put up that network of antennas. And 5G is generally, done off specific providers.
Right.
So in areas like this, what is really needed is actually stringing broadband on poles, and the REMCs have the poles in place already. So in a lot of areas, they are taking on that role, and our local REMC here is starting to take on that role. And the second thing I wanted to mention was that, at least in Indiana, libraries are working with and getting training from the Family and Social Services Administration to help people fill out assistance applications.
That's fantastic.
And the Indiana Library Federation is being extremely supportive and helpful to us, the local libraries, and they're actually publishing maps of things like libraries that have Wi-Fi that reaches outside the library into the parking lots or onto the street so that people can use that. And we're very much all trying to figure out just how far to let people back into the library, because we realize that we probably just can't let them in to browse. And at least here, most of our clientele are browsers. They don't even know what they want when they walk in.
Right.
And so most libraries are starting to do curbside service as well. But that depends on the person knowing what they want. So that's going to be a real challenge for us going forward.
Don, thank you so much for sharing. Do you mind if I ask what library system you're from?
This is the Wanata Cass Township Public Library. We are a single township public library in LaPorte County, which is Northwest Indiana, up not too far from Hammond and Gary.
Oh, okay. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Yeah, and again, these maps of Wi-Fi, help filling out social service forms, these are huge things that if your staff isn't furloughed, that make a big difference. Rita says, we're too tiny for 6-foot distancing, a one-room library. Yeah, that's a huge thing I've heard. Those libraries can't reopen even when everything else does. So what does that look like and for how long? Tina says, I think many of the community members in my town feel the community dialogue conversation is for them. In a good way, or did you miss a word? Not for them. No. There you go. Yeah. No, and I totally feel that. People feel disenfranchised and they feel like people make decisions for them. And that's an argument for not doing what I said, right? Don't do it with the community leaders. Help the community members feel enfranchised. Don't think that's how words work. The library conversation, another barrier is that situation is so unusual. Towns and county are having their own frantic conversations. We're a joint powers library. The library conversation gets a bit lost. We also can't afford to furlough for much longer. Yeah, no, that's a good point to bring up. Like, we see all of these things going viral about teachers who are going door to door for their students and this and that, and bringing everybody lunch, and we don't all have to strive to be the library or to be the organization that goes viral. Some of us are just trying to survive. And I think that that's really important to remember. If you don't have the bandwidth right now to have these conversations, then for the love of God, don't. Save them for when you do. Save your strength for the fights and the battles that you can have. I can't imagine. We've been very lucky. Unless, knock on wood, the government collapses, we're funded. And that's not true for those of you who rely on taxes and things. So yeah, I totally hear that. Libraries getting lost in the conversation. If you're able to fight back so that libraries don't get lost, again, I think, really, thanks, Stephanie, really framing it around how groups can work together and not let resources go to waste. But again, if this isn't the time to have that fight, do what you need to do for you guys, for sure. Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. Phone conferences for sure. Stephanie, next slide. Sorry, this one has gone. You guys are great. We've gone a little bit longer. I want to make sure that we get to the slide about where you can get more information.
Sorry, my thing died.
Oh, perfect. It is the next slide. So thank you guys, first off, so much for having this conversation with us. And I hope it doesn't feel like we're giving you more things to do. We just want to give you ideas, either now or in the future, how you can reach out to folks. So this link up at the top there, and Stephanie or Jennifer, please throw that in the chat, is where you can go to get the community dialogue guide. There's all kinds of templates like, oh, I want to invite the mayor. How the heck do I do that? I wrote a template for you. So you can just copy paste that, put your logo on, it's great. Any pictures that you see on this site are free for you to use. So as well as that video that we shared. So if anyone's like, well, what the heck does this look like? Show them Lisa's video. That's what a community dialogue looks like. Stephanie, next slide. And then one quick thing before we all go, we didn't talk about this very much, but I wanted to point out how flexible these dialogues can be. If we get back to a point where we're all in person and able to do these, it doesn't have to be a sit-down conversation like what Lisa had. A lot of folks have done these kind of in stations, like at fairs and things like that. So station 1 is a cool hands-on activity from the clearinghouse. There's our free activities on the clearinghouse. Station 2 is a question with sticky notes. Hey, who do you think doesn't use the library and why? Question 3 is an activity, 4 is a question, and so on and so forth. It doesn't have to be a big thing. You can just put up big sticky notes around your library and have people write stuff down. Really, the intent is to get feedback. Put big sticky notes in the grocery store for people who don't come to the library to give feedback. No one cares what form, we don't care what form you use or if you use our guide. We really just care that the questions are being asked and that you know, knowing that libraries are by far the best community organization as far as the diversity of people who walk in the door. We could leave it at that and say you guys are the best and you don't need to do any more, but there's little pockets that you guys could still hit and be the leaders for the rest of the field who need this kind of kick in the pants to be as inclusive as you guys are. So that's our real goal here. I do believe this is the last slide. Again, I want to thank you guys so much for joining us today. The recording and the chat will be posted on our website. So if there was a link or something you needed, you can get it from there, as well as previous recordings from other conversations we've had. If anyone has any questions or wants help with setting up a virtual dialogue, please reach out to me and Stephanie. We're happy to help. And if there's anything else that StarNet can do for you during all of this, again, send me or Stephanie an email. We're just trying to figure out how best to help you guys right now. That is our job right now. So thank you all so much. Hope to see you all later. And don't forget to fill out the report if you do one. All right, I'm gonna stop share. Perfect. Thank you, Gary.